The Iron WILs, Captain Sarah Chen, stood on the bridge of the UNSC Defiant, staring at the impossible. 3 Zalathorian warships hung in the darkness like metallic predators, each one twice the size of her destroyer. Their crimson hull plates gleamed under the distant starlight, pulsing with an energy that made her tactical officer nervous. "Ma'am, they're hailing us again," Lieutenant Marcus Webb said, his fingers dancing across the communications console. Same message: surrender or be destroyed. Sarah didn't blink. She'd spent 15 years in the United Colonial Navy, and she'd learned one thing about humanity that the Zalathurians clearly hadn't. Humans didn't surrender. Not when their backs were against the wall. Not when everything they loved was on the line. "How long until the colony ships clear the system?" she asked. 40 minutes, her navigator replied. "But Captain, we can't hold them off that long. Their weapons are—" "I didn't ask if we could hold them," Sarah interrupted quietly. "I asked how long." The bridge fell silent. Every crew member knew what she meant. The Defiant wasn't built to win this fight. It was built to buy time. Behind them, 3 massive colony ships carried 50,000 civilians. Families fleeing the outer colonies after the Zalathurian invasion began. Those ships were slow, unarmed, completely vulnerable. The alien fleet commander's voice crackled through the speakers, translated by their AI. "Human vessel, your resistance is foolish. We have studied your species. You lack our technology, our numbers, our evolutionary advantages. You are insects before gods. Stand aside." Sarah smiled coldly. "Send a response." Webb looked up, surprised. "What should I tell them?" "Tell them we're humans. That should be explanation enough." The Zalathurians had conquered 40 systems in 5 years. Their military doctrine was perfect, their strategies flawless. They'd never lost a major engagement. They fought with mathematical precision, calculating odds and minimizing risks. It made them efficient. It also made them predictable. "Engineering," Sarah called out. "How's our reactor?" Chief Engineer Rodriguez's voice came through rough and tired. "Holding at 90%, Captain. But if you're thinking what I think you're thinking, I need 120%. That'll melt half our systems. Only if we survive that long. Do it." The Defiant lurched forward, engines screaming as Sarah pushed her ship directly toward the alien formation. Every tactical manual said this was suicide. The Zalathurians would simply spread out, surround them, tear them apart with coordinated fire. But Sarah was counting on something those manuals didn't account for. Human unpredictability. Opens lock all forward torpedoes on the center ship. Navigation. Prepare evasive pattern Omega-7. Her XO stepped closer. "Captain, Omega-7 isn't a recognized pattern. It's just random." "Exactly," Sarah said. "They can't calculate what we're going to do if we don't know ourselves." The Zalathurian ships began moving into their standard encirclement formation, their weapons charging with deadly precision. Their computers had already calculated the Defiant's destruction down to the second. They were about to learn why humans were dangerous. Sarah's hand hovered over the emergency. "Combat protocols." In 40 minutes, those colony ships would jump to hyperspace. In 40 minutes, 50,000 people would live to see another day. In 40 minutes, humanity would survive. "All hands," she announced across the ship-wide channel. "This is the captain. I won't lie to you. The odds aren't in our favor. But odds never stopped humans before. Our ancestors crossed oceans in wooden boats. They walked on the moon with computers weaker than our watches. They survived ice ages, plagues, and wars. We come from a species that looked at the impossible and said, 'Watch me.'" She paused, watching her crew straighten at their stations. "Today, we show these aliens why humanity doesn't surrender. Today, we buy our people time. Today, we prove that humans don't need to be the strongest or the smartest. We just need to be too stubborn to quit." The Zalathorian weapons fired, and Sarah Chen smiled. Asterisk the dance of DEFIA and CEID, the first volley of plasma bolts screamed toward the Defiant like angry red comets. Sarah's hand slammed down on the helm control. Now. The destroyer twisted hard to port, engines whining in protest as it dove beneath the incoming fire. The plasma rounds sailed past, missing by mere meters. The heat from their passage made the hull groan, but they were still intact. Return fire. All forward tubes. 6 torpedoes erupted from the Defiant's launch bays, spiraling toward the center Zalathurian warship. The aliens' point defense systems activated immediately, tracking the missiles with perfect accuracy. 5 torpedoes were destroyed in brilliant flashes of light. The 6th one got through. It struck the warship's forward shield generator. And for just a moment, a section of their defensive barrier flickered. It wasn't enough to cause real damage, but it was enough to do something the Zalathurians hadn't experienced in years. It surprised them. They're recalculating, Webb announced, watching his tactical display. Their formation is adjusting. Sarah nodded. The aliens were trying to compensate for human unpredictability by adding more variables to their combat algorithms. It would make them more flexible, but it would also make them slower. Every calculation took time, even for their advanced computers, and time was exactly what Sarah needed to buy. Engineering, give me that power boost. Weapons, load the cargo bay surprise. Rodriguez's voice came back strained. Captain, the reactor's at 115%? Any higher, and we risk a containment breach. Noted. Push it to 125. The Defiant shuddered as more power flooded through its systems. The ship wasn't designed for this kind of abuse, but then again, humans weren't designed to survive half the things they'd accomplished. They did it anyway. The Zalathurian fleet spread wider, trying to box them in. Their tactics were textbook perfect, their positioning flawless. In any normal engagement, the Defiant would already be debris. But Sarah wasn't fighting a normal engagement.
Ald starboard.
Full thrust. The Defiant spun like a dancer, reversing course so suddenly that half the crew grabbed their stations to stay upright. The aliens' next barrage missed entirely, their targeting computers confused by the maneuver that defied all logic. Because it did defy logic. Sarah wasn't following any tactical pattern. She was improvising, making it up as she went, trusting her instincts over any battle plan. It was messy, inefficient, and completely unpredictable. It was perfectly human. Ma'am, they're getting frustrated, Webb said, a hint of amusement in his voice. I'm picking up increased chatter on their command channels. They're arguing about how to counter us. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. The Zalathurians were masters of warfare. But they'd built their entire military philosophy on predictability and calculation. They'd never fought an enemy that didn't make sense. They'd never fought humans who were too stubborn to follow the rules. Cargo bay doors open, the weapons officer reported. Surprise ready to deploy. The surprise had been Sarah's idea 3 days ago. When they'd evacuated the colonies, they'd loaded the Defiant with everything they could carry, including 3,000 tons of mining equipment, scrap metal, and industrial waste. Now, as the Defiant blazed past the nearest Zalathurian warship, those cargo doors opened wide. 3,000 tons of debris exploded into space like a metallic shotgun blast. Chunks of metal, broken machinery, and mining equipment scattered across the void in a chaotic cloud. The Zalathurian sensors went haywire, trying to track hundreds of new contacts simultaneously. Their perfect formation broke as ships swerved to avoid collisions. Their targeting systems struggled to differentiate between the Defiant and the sea. Of junk now filling the battlefield, Sarah punched through the gap they'd created, racing deeper into open space. Behind her, the colony ships were still running, their engines straining to reach the jump point. Time check? 22 minutes until the colony's jump, her navigator called out. 22 minutes. Sarah looked at her failing system's display. Hull integrity at 70%. Port engine overheating. Reactor approaching critical levels. The Defiant was dying by inches, but they were still flying. The Zalathurians regrouped quickly, their formation tightening as they pursued. They were adapting, learning. Soon, human unpredictability wouldn't be enough. Sarah would need something more. Rodriguez, how much power can you give me for one final burn? The engineer's response was immediate. Captain, no. Whatever you're planning, how much? A long pause. Then, quietly enough to tear this ship apart. Sarah looked at the countdown timer. 22 minutes until 50,000 people lived. Then let's make it count. The human Gambatitha Zalathorian fleet commander had calculated every possible outcome. Every maneuver the human ship could make was mapped, analyzed, and countered. There was no escape. No tactical brilliance could overcome such overwhelming odds. What the commander hadn't calculated was that humans didn't always try to escape. Full power to engines, Sarah ordered, her voice calm despite the chaos erupting around her. All remaining torpedoes armed. Set them for proximity detonation. Her exo stared at her. Captain, if we fire everything, we'll be completely defenseless. We're already defenseless, Commander. We're just too stubborn to admit it. She turned to face her crew, seeing the fear in their eyes mixed with something else. Trust. 15 minutes until the colonies jump. That's all we need. 15 more minutes of the impossible. The Defiant accelerated directly toward the alien formation, and for a moment the Zalathorians hesitated. Their computers couldn't understand it. A suicide run made no tactical sense. There had to be a trick, a hidden weapon, some unknown strategy. They didn't understand that sometimes human strategy was simply refusing to quit, launch all torpedoes. Pattern random scatter. 20 missiles erupted from the Defiant's remaining tubes, spreading out in unpredictable arcs. The Zalathorians' defense systems opened fire, destroying them one by one. But the missiles weren't meant to hit. They were meant to distract, as the aliens focused on the missiles. Sarah yanked the ship hard downward, diving beneath their firing solution. Plasma bolts seared through the space where they'd been seconds before. Reactor at 140%, Rodriguez shouted over the com. Captain, we're cooking ourselves alive up here. Just a little longer. The hull screamed in protest as Sarah pushed the Defiant through maneuvers no ship was designed to survive. Metal groaned, circuits overloaded, and warning klaxons blared across every deck. But they kept moving, kept dodging, kept fighting. The Zalathorian commander finally made his decision. If calculations couldn't predict the humans, then overwhelming firepower would simply eliminate all possibilities. All three warships opened fire simultaneously, filling the space around the Defiant with a hellstorm of plasma. Sarah saw it coming. There was nowhere to dodge, no clever trick left to pull. The math had finally caught up with them. Brace for impact. The first bolt struck their port side, tearing through already weakened armor. The second hit their starboard engine, and the ship lurched violently. The third grazed their hull, leaving a molten scar across their surface. But they were still flying. Hull breach on decks 4 and 5. Casualties reported. Webb's voice was tight with stress. Sarah checked the countdown. 8 minutes. The colony ships were so close. Rodriguez. Emergency power to shields. Strip it from life support if you have to. Captain, that'll give us maybe 3 more hits before 3 hits is 3 more than 0. Do it. The Defiant limped forward, trailing atmosphere and debris. Every system was failing. The reactor was minutes from meltdown. Half the crew was working in sealed compartments as the ship fell apart around them, and still. Sarah Chen refused to stop. The Zalathorians closed in for the kill. Their formation perfect, their weapons charged. This time, there would be no escape. No trick. No miracle. Her navigator said quietly. The colonies just reached the jump point. Sarah felt something release in her chest. Time to jump? 30 seconds. She looked at her dying ship, her exhausted crew, and the alien warships preparing to finish them. 30 seconds. They just needed 30 more seconds. All power to rear shields. Everything we have left. Ah, shit. The ship groaned as every remaining drop of energy flowed backward, creating one final barrier between them and destruction. It wouldn't be enough. Not nearly enough, but it would be something. The Zalathorians fired. Plasma. Bolts hammered into the Defiant shields like the fist of an angry god. The barriers held for 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. On the 4th second, they collapsed. On the 5th second, the colony ships vanished into hyperspace, carrying 50,000 souls to safety. On the 6th second, Captain Sarah Chen smiled. The final volley struck the Defiant's reactor core just as it reached critical mass. The destroyer exploded in a brilliant flash of light that outshone the nearby star for a brief,
Ow!
glorious moment. The Zalathorian commander stared at the empty space where the human ship had been. His computers finally had an answer. The humans had lost. Tactically, strategically, mathematically, they had been defeated. But as he watched the 3 colony ships disappear into the safety of hyperspace, he realized something his calculations had never accounted for. Humans didn't measure victory the same way. The Defiant was gone. But 50,000 humans lived, and those humans would remember. They would tell stories of Captain Sarah Chen and her crew. They would teach their children about the ship that wouldn't surrender. They would build new ships, train new crews, come back stronger. Because that's what humans did. The Zalathurian commander updated his combat files with new data. Notation: human vessels may prioritize objectives over survival. Warning: unpredictability factor cannot be calculated. Recommendation: avoid engagement when possible. In the debris field, where the Defiant made its last stand, a single piece of the hull drifted in the darkness. Scorched and twisted, but still readable. UNSC Defiant. The ship was destroyed. But its name would live forever because humanity never forgot those who bought tomorrow with today's sacrifice. And they never, ever stopped fighting. Asterisk.